A grandmother's worst nightmare lasted 6 hours, but the real tragedy was what the family said during those 6 hours. Margaret Foster had spent 71 years building a life of careful attention to detail. As a retired third-grade teacher from Philadelphia's Germantown neighborhood, she had taught thousands of children not just reading and arithmetic, but something far more valuable: the art of staying calm when things go wrong. Her weathered hands, marked by decades of grading papers and wiping away children's tears, now rested gently on the shoulders of her 3-year-old grandson, Oliver. It was Tuesday, March 12th, 2024, and the spring afternoon sun filtered through the windows of her daughter Sarah's row house on Chelton Avenue. Sarah and her husband Michael both worked demanding jobs downtown, and Margaret had volunteered to watch Oliver 2 days a week. It gave her purpose, she said, though her daughter worried it might be too much for a woman her age. "Mom, are you absolutely sure?" Sarah had asked that morning, her coat already on, car keys jangling. "Oliver's in one of his moods today. He barely slept last night." Margaret had waved away her concern with the same confident smile she'd used to reassure nervous parents for 40 years. "Sweetheart, I raised you and your brother without losing either one of you. I think I can manage one tired 3-year-old for 6 hours." What Margaret didn't say was that she herself hadn't slept well either. At her age, sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the usual aches and the kind of restless thoughts that accumulate over 7 decades. But she'd never admit weakness, not to her daughter, who already worried too much. The first few hours passed peacefully. Margaret made Oliver his favorite lunch: peanut butter and banana sandwiches with the crusts cut off just so. She'd learned long ago that small details mattered to small people. They watched one episode of his dinosaur cartoon, then she suggested a game. "How about hide and seek?" Margaret said, knowing the game usually tired children out before nap time. Oliver's eyes lit up with that particular gleam that made him look exactly like his mother had at that age. "I hide first, Grandma. Count to 50. Margaret smiled and covered her eyes, counting slowly and deliberately, giving him plenty of time. She heard his little feet padding across the hardwood floors, heard a door creak open somewhere upstairs. When she reached 50, she called out, "Ready or not, here I come." She checked behind the living room curtains first. That's where he usually hid, thinking if he couldn't see out, no one could see in. Not there. She checked under the dining room table, behind the kitchen door, in the bathroom, behind the shower curtain. Each empty hiding spot made her smile. He was getting cleverer. "I'm going to find you," she sang out, keeping her voice playful. No response. Just the quiet of the house settling around her. Margaret climbed the stairs to the second floor, her knees protesting slightly with each step. Sarah's bedroom, empty. The guest bathroom, empty. Michael's home office, empty. That left only Oliver's room, and the master bedroom where her daughter and son-in-law slept. Oliver's room was an explosion of primary colors and toys. She checked the usual spots: under his race car bed, inside his toy chest, behind the rocking chair. Nothing. Her chest tightened slightly, but she pushed the feeling away. He's just found a really good spot, she told herself. The master bedroom was larger, with more possibilities. She checked under the bed behind the door, in the attached bathroom. Then she opened a walk-in closet. It was deeper than most closets in these old Philadelphia row houses, more like a small room. Years of accumulated belongings lined the walls. Winter coats hung heavy on the rod. Boxes of old clothes sat stacked on upper shelves, waiting for a donation run that never seemed to happen. Shoes cluttered the floor. In the back corner, she noticed a pile of blankets and some of Oliver's toys that shouldn't have been there. "Oliver," she called into the closet, but heard nothing. She should have looked more carefully. She should have moved those blankets. But at 71, bending down to search through piles on closet floors wasn't as easy as it once was. And she'd already checked every reasonable hiding place. The boy had to be somewhere. Margaret went back downstairs, checking each room again, more carefully this time. Still nothing. A small kernel of worry began to bloom in her chest. "Oliver, sweetheart, you win. You found the best hiding spot ever. You can come out now." Silence. "Oliver, Grandma's tired. Let's have some cookies." Nothing. The kernel of worry grew larger. Margaret walked through the house again, this time opening cabinets, checking inside the shower, looking in places too small for even a child. As she passed through the kitchen, she glanced at the back door. It was unlocked. Her heart dropped into her stomach, like a stone falling down a well. The back door led to a small yard, which connected to an alley that ran behind the entire block of row houses. She remembered now. She'd unlocked it earlier to let some fresh air in, while they ate lunch. She'd meant to lock it again afterward. But had she? In the pleasant rhythm of the afternoon, had she forgotten? Margaret's hands began to shake as she opened the door and stepped into the yard. "Oliver!" "Oh, woo-woo." Her voice came out higher, more strained. "Oliver, baby, where are you?" The yard was empty. The gate to the alley stood slightly ajar, swaying gently in the March breeze. Every nightmare scenario she'd ever imagined in her 7 decades of life suddenly crashed down on her at once. The alley, the street beyond, cars. Down, going, I pay. Strangers. The news stories she'd seen about children who wandered away. She'd taught child safety for 40 years. She knew the statistics. The first few hours were critical. Her phone was in her purse in the living room. Margaret ran inside, her niece forgotten, her age forgotten, only the primal fear of a grandmother whose grandchild was missing. She dialed 911 with fingers that wouldn't cooperate, having to start over twice before getting the numbers right. 911. What's your emergency? My grandson is missing. He's 3 years old. I can't find him anywhere. The back door was unlocked. Please, you have to help me. The words tumbled out in a rush. Ma'am, stay calm. What's your address? Margaret gave the address on Chelton Avenue, struggling to keep her voice steady. When did you last see the child? Maybe 20 minutes ago. We were playing hide and seek. I thought he was hiding, but I've checked everywhere and the back door was unlocked, and I can't find him. And her voice broke. Officers are on the way, ma'am. I need you to stay at the house in case he comes back. Can you do that for me? Margaret wanted to scream that she needed to be out searching, needed to be checking every house, every car, every possible place, but she forced herself to say yes. The 911 operator kept her on the line, asking questions about what Oliver was wearing, whether he knew his address, whether there were any medical conditions. Each question was a knife cutting into her. Blue jeans, a red t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur, brown hair, brown eyes. No, he didn't know his address. He was only 3. No medical conditions, but he was small for his age. Maybe someone wouldn't realize he was just a baby. She had to call Sarah. Margaret hung up with 911 and dialed her daughter with shaking hands. The phone rang once, twice. Come on, she whispered. Hey, Mom, is everything? Sarah, you need to come home right now. It's Oliver. He's missing. There was a pause, just a fraction of a second, where the world held its breath. What do you mean missing? We were playing hide and seek, and I can't find him, and the back door was unlocked, and I've called the police, but... Oh my God. Sarah's voice went up an octave. Oh my God, Mom. How long has he been gone? I don't know. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe. 20 minutes? 20 minutes, and you're just calling me now? Sarah's voice cracked into something between a scream and a sob. What were you doing? Why weren't you watching him? I was watching him. We were just playing and... Michael... Sarah was screaming for her husband now. Michael, it's Oliver. We have to go now. Then back to Margaret, her voice raw with terror and rage. How could you let this happen? How could you let him out of your sight? I trusted you with my baby. And you... Sarah, please. The line went dead. Margaret stood in the kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt something crack inside her chest. Her daughter's words echoed in the empty house. How could you let this happen? I trusted you. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that it was just a game, that the door must have been left unlocked by accident, that she'd only looked away for a moment. But what defense was there? Oliver was gone. That was the only fact that mattered. Everything else was just excuses. The police arrived within 7 minutes. 2 officers who immediately began a systematic search of the house while asking Margaret questions. She told them everything. About the game, about checking the rooms, about finding the back door unlocked. One officer, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 30, was kind but firm. Ma'am, are you certain you checked everywhere inside? Sometimes in these old houses, kids find spaces we don't think to look. I checked everywhere, Margaret insisted, though doubt crept in even as she said it. Had she? And joining me, got down with you. After he can start. And had she really? I called his name. He would have answered. Not always, the officer said gently. Sometimes they fall asleep in their hiding spots. Let's check again thoroughly before we expand the search outside. But Margaret barely heard her. Her mind was spiraling. Michael and Sarah would be here any minute. What would she say to them? How could she face them? This was her fault. She should have been more careful. Should have locked the door. Should have kept him in sight. Should have. Should have. Should have. More police arrived. Margaret heard one of them talking into their radio about bringing in a canine unit. A dog to track her grandson's scent through the neighborhood like he was a missing person on the news. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Sarah's car screeched to a stop outside. Margaret heard the door slam, heard her daughter running up the front steps. Sarah burst through the door, her face pale, her eyes wild. "Where is he? Have you found him?" "Not yet, ma'am," one of the officers said. "We're conducting a thorough search." Sarah wasn't listening. She was already running through the house, calling Oliver's name, opening every door, every cabinet, every possible space. Michael came in behind her, his face a mask of controlled terror. "Mrs. Foster," he said to Margaret, his voice cold and measured in a way that was somehow worse than Sarah's screaming. "Walk me through exactly what happened. Every single detail." Margaret tried. She explained the game, the counting, the searching, but with each word, she watched Michael's face harden. "You left the back door unlocked. I thought I'd locked it. I meant to. You thought." He said it like a curse. "You thought. My son is missing because you thought." "Michael, please, do you have any idea what's out there?" His voice was rising now, the control cracking. "Do you know what happens to children who disappear? I see it every day in my work. I know the statistics. And you let him walk out the back door because you thought you'd locked it." "I didn't let him." "What were you doing? What was so important that you couldn't keep your eyes on one child for one afternoon?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, having completed her frantic search of the upstairs. Her eyes were red, streaming with tears. When she looked at Margaret, there was something there that cut deeper than anger. It was betrayal. "You said you could do this," Sarah whispered. "You insisted. You said I worried too much, that you'd raised 2 children, that you knew what you were doing." "Sarah, honey, don't honey me. Don't you dare." Sarah's voice broke. "He's 3 years old, Mom. 3. He still needs help putting on his shoes. He's afraid of the dark. And now he's out there somewhere, alone and scared. And it's because you couldn't do the one thing I asked you to do. Watch my son." Margaret felt tears streaming down her own face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring him back," Sarah screamed. "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you lost my baby." An officer stepped between them, gently. "Folks, I know this is difficult, but we need to stay focused. We have officers canvassing the neighborhood. We're checking with all the neighbors. The K9 unit will be here in 10 minutes. Michael pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the news stations. We need his face on every channel. We need Amber Alert. We need Amber Alert." His voice faded as he walked outside, already dialing. Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking with sobs. Margaret wanted to go to her, to hold her like she had when Sarah was small and afraid. But she couldn't move. She had no right to comfort. This was her fault. Neighbors began appearing at the door, having heard the commotion, having seen the police cars. Mrs. Chen from next door, the Harrises from across the street, old Mr. Washington from 2 houses down. Everyone wanted to help search. Someone had already printed flyers with Oliver's description. Someone else had posted on the neighborhood Facebook group. Margaret found herself sitting in the kitchen while controlled chaos swirled around her. Police officers coming and going, radios crackling with updates, neighbors organizing search parties for the streets and the park 3 blocks away. She felt utterly useless, frozen in place by guilt and fear. 2 hours passed. Then, 3. The K9 unit arrived, and the dog picked up Oliver's scent in the backyard, tracked it to the alley gate, then seemed to lose it, where the alley intersected with the main street. The officer explained that car exhaust and other factors could confuse the scent trail. They were expanding the search radius. A news van pulled up outside. Michael gave an interview on the front steps, holding a photo of Oliver from his last birthday. "Please," he said to the camera, his voice breaking, "if anyone has seen this boy, call the police immediately. His name is Oliver Chen Foster. He is 3 years old. He's scared. He needs to come home." Sarah couldn't stop crying. She sat on the couch, Margaret's sister Rita beside her, while she scrolled frantically through her phone, checking every local news site, every social media update, as if Oliver might somehow appear in the digital world since he'd vanished from the real one. Margaret stood in the corner of the living room, invisible. "Where should be all? Or I'd subject outside a bill and shining was up to your eyes." No one spoke to her directly anymore. She was the cause of this nightmare, and everyone knew it. She heard fragments of conversations. 71 years old. Maybe she shouldn't have been watching him. "My mother-in-law is the same age, still sharp as a tack, but you have to know your limits. So easy for something to happen when you look away for just a second." The words burrowed into her like insects. Each one was true. Each one was a judgment she deserved. 4 hours in, a detective arrived, a serious woman in her 40s, who introduced herself as Detective Park. She took Margaret into the kitchen for a private conversation. "Mrs. Foster, I need you to think very carefully. Is there any possibility Oliver is still in this house? Could there be a space you haven't checked?" "The officers searched everywhere," Margaret said, her voice hollow. "I understand. But you know this house better than they do. Is there anywhere a child might crawl into? Any space that might seem impossible, but isn't?" Margaret tried to think through the fog of fear. "There's a storage area under the basement stairs, but it's locked. There's the attic, but the ladder is pulled up and he couldn't reach it. What about the bedrooms? Any furniture with spaces behind or under?" The police checked under all the beds. "Walk me through the master bedroom closet." Wait. They went upstairs together. The closet looked different now, disturbed by the earlier police search. Items had been moved, boxes opened and checked. Detective Park walked slowly through the space, looking up, down, behind. "There," she said, pointing to the back corner. "What's that?" It was the pile of blankets Margaret had noticed earlier. Someone had moved them slightly during the search, but they were still there, mounded up with some toys scattered around them. Just some old blankets, I think, Margaret said. And Oliver's toys. He must have brought them in here sometime. Detective Park knelt down and carefully lifted one of the blankets. There, curled in a tight ball, fast asleep among his plastic dinosaurs and stuffed animals, was Oliver. His little chest rose and fell with the deep, peaceful breathing of childhood sleep. His thumb was in his mouth, something his parents had been trying to break him of. His dinosaur t-shirt had ridden up, showing his round belly. He looked completely content, as if sleeping in a closet corner was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, neither woman moved. They just stared at this impossible, miraculous sight. Then, Detective Park carefully reached out and gently touched Oliver's shoulder. "Oliver? Hey, buddy, wake up." The little boy's eyes fluttered open. He looked confused, staring up at the two women looking down at him. Then he yawned, a huge yawn that scrunched up his whole face. "Hi, Grandma," he said sleepily. "You didn't find me. I won." Margaret felt her knees give out. She sat down hard on the closet floor, and a sound came out of her that was half laugh, half sob. "Yes, baby," she managed to say. "You won. Won." Detective Park spoke into her radio. "We've got him. The child is safe. He was in the house the whole time, sleeping in the master bedroom closet, unharmed." The response over the radio was immediate and loud. Margaret heard shouting from downstairs, footsteps pounding up the stairs. Sarah appeared in the closet doorway and let out a scream that was pure relief and joy all at once. "Oliver! Wife!" She dropped to her knees and scooped him up, squeezing him so tight he protested. "Mommy, too hard." "Oh, God. Oh, thank God." Sarah was crying and laughing at the same time, covering his face with kisses. "Where were you? We were so scared. Why didn't you answer when we called?" Oliver looked genuinely confused by all the fuss. "I was hiding. Grandma was supposed to find me, but I fell asleep. Did I win?" Michael pushed into the closet, and then he was holding both Sarah and Oliver, the three of them wrapped together. Relief flooded the house like water breaking through a dam. Officers were smiling, talking into their radios to call off the search. Neighbors were hugging each other in the hallway. Someone was crying happy tears. Margaret slowly pulled herself to her feet, using the closet door frame. She watched her family hold each other and felt something strange. Oliver was safe. He'd been safe the whole time. He'd never been in danger. He'd simply been sleeping in a really good hiding spot while the entire world fell apart around him. But the relief she expected to feel wouldn't come. Instead, there was just a hollow numbness. Oliver was safe. But the words couldn't be taken back. Sarah finally pulled away from her husband and son, her face streaked with tears. She saw Margaret standing there, and something flickered across her expression. Shame, maybe, or regret. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but Margaret shook her head. "I'm going to go downstairs," Margaret said quietly. "Give you all some space." She walked through the celebrating crowd, invisible again, but in a different way now. Everyone was too focused on Oliver, on the miracle of him being safe, to notice the old woman who'd been at the center of the storm. She made it to the kitchen and sat down at the table, her hands shaking. Detective Park found her there 20 minutes later, after most of the police had cleared out, and the neighbors had gone home to spread the good news. Mrs. Foster, that must have been terrifying. Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. I want you to know, this happens more often than people think. Children fall asleep in hiding spots. It's actually quite common. The problem is, in our panic, we assume the worst instead of doing a systematic search. I should have looked more carefully, Margaret whispered. You called for help immediately. You did what you thought was right. Detective Park sat down across from her. But I want to talk to you about something important. That closet back there, it's a hazard. I saw boxes stacked up to the ceiling. Old coats, things piled everywhere. If there had been an emergency, if those boxes had fallen on him, if... Margaret looked up. You're right. I know it's hard to let go of things, but in a house with small children, you need clear spaces. No clutter that a child can burrow into. Regular decluttering isn't just about neatness, it's about safety. If that closet had been organized, you would have spotted him immediately. The detective continued, her voice gentle but firm. And I noticed the back door lock is a simple thumb turn. For a house with a toddler, you might want to consider installing a higher deadbolt, something a child can't reach and accidentally unlock. Those small changes. Margaret absorbed the information like someone taking medicine that tastes bitter but necessary. After Detective Park left, Margaret sat alone in the kitchen while the sounds of family reunion filtered down from upstairs. She heard Oliver's little voice asking for juice, heard Sarah's relieved laughter, heard Michael on the phone telling someone that everything was okay, that Oliver was safe. An hour later, Sarah came downstairs. She'd washed her face and changed her shirt, which Margaret realized must have been soaked with tears and sweat from the afternoon's terror. Sarah sat down across from her mother without speaking for a long moment. Mom, she finally said, her voice hoarse. I said some terrible things to you today. Margaret shook her head. You were scared. You thought your child was missing. That doesn't make it okay. Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. The things I said to you about trust, about you losing Oliver, I was cruel. I was scared out of my mind, and I took it out on you. He was my responsibility, Margaret said. I should have... He was sleeping in a closet, Mom. You couldn't have known. The police couldn't find him either, and they're trained for this. Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hands. I'm so sorry for what I said. I'm so sorry for blaming you. You didn't do anything wrong. It was just a terrible situation. Margaret felt the tears she'd been holding back finally come. I thought I'd lost him. I thought I'd let something happen to him because I wasn't careful enough. You did everything right. You called for help immediately. You didn't waste time. If he really had been missing, those first few minutes would have been critical, and you didn't hesitate. Sarah squeezed her mother's hands. I need you to hear me. This wasn't your fault. Michael appeared in the doorway, Oliver on his hip. The little boy was eating crackers, completely oblivious to the emotional wreckage of the afternoon. "Margaret," Michael said, and his voice was different now, softer, full of its own regret. "I owe you an apology too. What I said was unforgivable. I was terrified, and I lashed out at you when you were just as scared as we were." "You thought your son was in danger," Margaret said. "That's no excuse for cruelty." Michael shifted Oliver to his other hip. "Your family? You're a wonderful grandmother. Oliver adores you, and I made you feel like you'd failed when the only failure was all of us not staying calm enough to search properly before panicking." "Grandma!" Oliver reached out for her. "Can we play again tomorrow? I know an even better hiding spot." Everyone laughed, the kind of laughter that comes after crying, when relief makes everything seem both funnier and more precious. Margaret took her grandson and held him close, breathing in his little boy's smell of crackers and shampoo, and that indefinable scent that was just Oliver. "Maybe we'll play a different game tomorrow," she said. But even as the family began to heal from the afternoon's terror, even as apologies were offered and accepted, even as Oliver chatted happily about his excellent hiding spot, Margaret knew something had changed. She had changed. In those 6 hours, she had experienced a kind of fear she'd never known before. But worse than the fear had been the words, "I'm being and chewy. Oh, I'm tricked. I'm sorry." Words spoken in panic and terror, words meant to wound, words that laid bare every fear a person carries about their own adequacy and worth. Sarah and Michael had apologized, and Margaret believed their apologies were genuine. But she also knew that those words, once spoken, could never be truly taken back. They existed now, part of the fabric of their relationship. In the moment of greatest fear, her daughter and son-in-law had turned on her with blame and accusation instead of coming together. What did that say about trust, about family, about the things we reveal about ourselves when we're terrified? Over the next few days, Margaret found herself thinking about Detective Park's words about the closet. She asked Sarah and Michael if she could spend a weekend organizing it, and they agreed immediately, perhaps trying to make up for what had happened. She worked slowly, carefully, sorting through boxes that had sat untouched for years. Old clothes that no longer fit, that would never be worn again, went into donation bags. Shoes with broken heels, coats with torn linings, things that were being kept for someday, went into the trash. She found Christmas decorations from when Sarah was a child, baby clothes from Oliver's first year, boxes of papers that had no purpose anymore. With each bag she carried out, the closet became clearer, simpler, safer. She installed clear storage bins for the things worth keeping, labeled everything, created a system. When she was done, the closet was transformed. You could see into every corner. Nothing was piled or hidden. Oliver could never disappear in there again. But Margaret applied the same principle to the whole house. The basement storage was sorted and organized. The kitchen junk drawers were emptied, and only the essentials returned. The garage was cleared of boxes that had sat unopened since the last move. Years of accumulation, of maybe I'll need this someday, were released. Sarah watched her mother work with something like wonder. "Mom, you don't have to do all this." "Yes, I do," Margaret said, tying up another trash bag. "I've been holding on to things I don't need, things that just create hazards and hiding places. It's time to let them go." But she wasn't just talking about objects, and both women knew it. That Sunday evening, after a full weekend of organizing, Margaret sat down with Sarah and Michael for a serious conversation. Oliver was in bed, and the house was quiet. "I want to talk about what happened," Margaret said. "Not to rehash it, but to learn from it." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances, but nodded. "I've been thinking about those 6 hours," Margaret continued. "Oliver was never in danger. He was sleeping safely in the closet the whole time. But we didn't know that, so we experienced real fear, real terror. And in that fear, we all reacted in ways that hurt each other. Mom, we apologized." Sarah started. "I know, honey, and I accept your apologies, but I want us to really think about this. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? Because life will give us more emergencies. Maybe not like this, but there will be other moments of crisis. And I want us—" Michael leaned forward. "You're right. I've been thinking about it too. I work in crisis management, and I fell apart. I blamed you immediately instead of staying rational." "I did the same," Sarah admitted. "I was so scared I couldn't think straight. I just needed someone to blame, and you were there." "That's human," Margaret said gently. "Fear makes us irrational. But here's what I learned. Before we panic, we need to search systematically. I looked for Oliver, but I didn't really search. I glanced into places. I called out and assumed he'd answer. I didn't." "The detective said the same thing," Sarah said. "She told us that in missing child cases, a significant percentage of children are found in the home, usually sleeping. But panic makes us assume the worst and skip right to outdoor searches." "Exactly," Margaret said. "So rule number 1 for any crisis: stay as calm as possible. Think systematically. Don't assume the worst-case scenario until you've eliminated the better ones." Michael nodded. "What else?" "Don't blame," Margaret said quietly. "Not until you know all the facts. Not in the moment of crisis. Blame doesn't help find the solution. It just creates another problem." "That's hard when you're terrified for your child," Sarah said. But her voice was thoughtful, not defensive. "I know it is. But imagine if Oliver really had been missing. If he'd been in real danger. Would spending precious minutes screaming at me have helped? Or would working together have been more effective?" The room was silent as they all considered this. "You're right," Michael finally said. "In my work, we teach that crisis management requires clear heads and teamwork. I violated every principle I teach others. I'm sorry for that, Margaret. Not just for hurting you, but for making a bad situation worse." "We all made it worse," Sarah said. "The police, the neighbors, the news vans. All of that happened because we panicked instead of searching properly." Margaret took a deep breath. "There's something else. The house needed to be decluttered. I've been putting it off for years, but that closet was dangerous. All those boxes, all that stuff piled up, it created exactly the kind of space a child could disappear into." Sarah looked embarrassed. "That's my fault, too. I keep meaning to go through everything, but there's never time. Make time, Margaret said firmly, back in her teacher voice. Not just for safety, but for your own peace of mind. Every item you keep that you don't need or use is something taking up space in your home and your mind. Let it go. Donate it. Throw it away. Keep only what you need and love. They talked late into the night, creating new protocols for emergencies. A checklist for searching the house before calling police. Agreement that accusations would wait until after crisis resolution. A commitment to regular decluttering. Better door locks. A plan for Oliver as he got older to teach him about safety without making him afraid. It was the kind of conversation that should have happened before the crisis, but Margaret knew that sometimes lessons only land after the fear has made us desperate to learn them. 3 months later, on a warm June afternoon, Margaret was again watching Oliver. But things were different now. The house was clearer, more organized. The closets had been thoroughly decluttered, with everything visible and accessible. The back door had a new deadbolt installed high enough that Oliver couldn't reach it. And Margaret had a new rule. Oliver stayed in the same room with her unless he was in a safe, enclosed play space. They weren't playing hide and seek. Instead, they were building with blocks in the living room, where Margaret could see him at all times. Oliver was chattering about his upcoming birthday party, about the dinosaur cake he wanted. "Grandma," he said suddenly, looking up from his blocks, "remember when I fell asleep in Mommy's closet and everyone got scared?" Margaret felt her chest tighten slightly, but kept her voice calm. "I remember, sweetie. Mommy said I scared everyone, but I was just sleeping. I didn't mean to be scary." "I know you didn't, honey. Sometimes things that seem fun to kids seem scary to grown-ups." Oliver considered this seriously, his little face thoughtful. "Mommy said we don't play hiding games anymore, unless you say it's okay." "That's right. There are good games and safe games, and we're going to stick to those." "Okay." He went back to his blocks. The whole incident apparently processed and filed away in his 3-year-old mind. But Margaret knew she would carry it differently. She would carry it as a reminder of how quickly love can turn to blame in moments of fear. How the words we speak when we're terrified can wound deeper than we intend. How clutter and disorganization aren't just aesthetic problems, but safety hazards. How panic serves no one, but systematic thinking can solve almost anything. She would carry it as a reminder to let go of things that don't serve, whether they're objects filling closets or assumptions filling minds. To search thoroughly before assuming the worst. To stay calm in crisis. To choose teamwork over blame. Erst, and blindly, blame. Most of all, she would carry it as a reminder that the real danger often isn't the one we fear. Oliver had never been in danger that afternoon. The danger had been in how fear made them turn on each other, how it made them lose their ability to think clearly, how it brought out the worst instead of the best in people who loved each other. The house was safer now. Clearer. The family had learned lessons that might save them pain in future crises. But Margaret also knew that some scars remain, invisible reminders of the afternoon when the whole world seemed to end, and then, miraculously, didn't. Oliver looked up from his blocks again. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart, Margaret said, and meant it with her whole heart. It was enough. It had to be enough. Because in the end, after the fear subsides and the apologies are spoken and the lessons are learned, love is what remains. Tested, perhaps. Scarred, certainly. But still there. Still real. Still worth everything.